the other battle from 3 battles in Germany, the Siege of Danzig. Now, this is going to take an intro. Why? Well, it would need one anyway, because look at this map. There's no hexes. This one's got hexes, and it works largely with the Viva l'Empereur series. But this one plays more like, see if I can find it. There it is. That soapbox all the way on the end there. The Art of Siege has a couple of games in it. Lille and Sevastopol, which are this intriguing style of siege warfare where you're laying down parallels and saps to move forward. The saps are the zigzags to prevent artillery fire. Basically, Vauban style siege warfare. Sevastopol is Crimean War. It's rather late in that period, but it still uses many of the same techniques. And in fact, some of them are used quite late, you know, in World War I as well. So you're talking about techniques that lasted a long, long period of time to allow troops to get up close enough to defended positions to be able to lay down devastating fire. Well, anyway, I think Sevastopol is the better of those two. The game includes some other hex-based ancient and medieval sieges as well. That set has Tyre and Acre, and Constantinople was the S&T magazine using that. That's not really, none of them are exactly the same in terms of using the same system. But anyway, enough there. It's a really intriguing box set, and the Sevastopol game is probably one of the best war games out there. Certainly the best siege game I've seen. So it's kind of cool to see this getting a new life. And in fact, the designer, Monsieur Roy, has correctly, as far as I'm concerned, attributed that. I would have been very disturbed to see it just appear kind of like, oh yeah, maybe I remember something from way back. But he's a fan of SPI games, and it's great to see it being, you know, looked at again. Here's the problem, though. I don't know the rules that well. I've read through them. Fair enough. This part actually feels pretty comfortable to me, but I don't know the rules enough to be able to set up on here. It's a little different from the way those earlier games operated, and it's also not clear to me how important these units over here are going to be allowed to be in here, in the fortress, or along the Vistule. And I have to put some thought to that as well. Normally I'm able to make that thought ahead of time, but my hope here is that I can, by refreshing the rules, even though I just read them, first of all, you're going to need the presentation to indicate this is not pure, this part is not regular Viva l'Empereur, and this is, unless you've looked at those Art of Siege games, something you've probably not seen before. So, you know, and it had, like the Art of Siege games, where each of the series has its own, you know, basically it has its own rules completely rewritten, even though there's similarities between some of the rules. It's why it's not a real quad. It's not using sort of a standard rules. Anyway, let's take a look at what these rules define. And I'm not going to worry about the base Viva l'Empereur rules. Yeah, I know I didn't explain them before I did Jena and Austerlitz. Auerstadt. Give me the AU, and I got to keep going. But I have explained them in at least one of the games in the series, and they really haven't changed all that much. Okay, so time scale. this is, let me briefly look at some of the things. So you've got a map here that has no hexes that you're going to be measuring on using this rangefinder, and also using counters to extend works that look kind of like this. Okay, this is the actual work, siege works, but they have no effect on play. But you're going to have that. You have these pink dots, which are locations where the artillery can sit, and infantry as well. But I haven't put the infantry out because I'm not quite... I can figure out my gun zones, my fire zones. You got stuff that shows up here in this little redoubt here, and I'm not sure, because that doesn't have little dots. I'm not sure if I can just kind of place it. If I can, it probably gets placed somewhat like this or something, but I don't know. And that gives me my fire zones to cover what I can do to the entrenchments as they're moving forward, or siege works, or also if and when French units jump out of their trenches, you know, how I can hurt them. The walls themselves have a strength on them. They don't have a marker for it. You're going to be using the normal number markers to indicate how much damage they take. I think they have like 20 points to begin with. And you got to get them down to 0, but you can assault them before they hit 0. And basically you clear the remaining rubble away if you take it as the French. The French are going to be coming from back here, this concentration area. That's on the siege map. But the siege map is basically this area here. Well, this area here covers the siege map. The siege map actually doesn't cover all of that area. And so when you enter this area, your units begin to deploy on here and can be used for the siege, but there's things that you're going to be able to do on the what's called the operational map. Okay. We've got a sequence of turns with all the sort of special rules for turns, the reinforcements laid out for it. You got to keep track of the city's morale. If it gets to 0, the city surrenders. You get an extra turn marker. It kind of makes sense. You've got 1 turn marker to deal with the operational turn. No. The siege turn, which is a longer period of time in a smaller space, and another turn marker without a track, and I probably put it over here or something, that's going to handle the operational phases on this map that happen in between siege turns. And you'll see how that pulsing works. It's in the sequence of play here. So that's the operational turn there. You got different fire chart here for firing on the map, on the siege map. You've got this, which covers a number of values that need to be tracked. One of them is guns that the Prussians can pull up to replace artillery that gets damaged. Another one is, or other ones include French ammo for their big siege guns. The units are a little weird on this. So you've got units that look very much like the normal units that are intended to be used here on the operational map. And there you have sorry. What the hell? That's not. Nope. Yeah. So there you have line infantry, cavalry, artillery, etc. And for the most part, the Prussians don't have this stuff. They do get a pile of it here, though, and they have a bunch of cav here that are deployed there for whatever that's worth. And we'll see how that all links in. You'll also have, so those are regimental-sized units, You also have battalion-sized units, which in some cases are the same as the regimental size unit. You know, you got a small unit of guards or something, it might just end up being a battalion that's shown on the map with the regimental size unit or whatever. Not, but most of them break down. So this is like, I think there's 3, no, that's something different. Yeah, but when the French come on, they have a bunch of these, and you'll see like this will be one of those regimental units, and it breaks down into 3 of these battalions, which are each like 2 steps. Yeah, that's about the right size. Those are used for the siege works, and that's just basically the size you perform construction works with, and that you perform the actual assaults with, rather than the regular units. Anything else that you need? You got this bridge. There must be a special rule for bridging the Vistula. Yes, there is. You don't have any leaders in this game, and there's no command and control rules. There cannot be. You have these things, which represent the siege works that you built. So this is a sap. The intention of a sap is to get you closer to the walls without providing any straight fire. You know, if you took the straight path to the wall, it would be a straight line, and you could just fire down it and kill everybody coming towards you. By zigzagging, you end up preventing that. These are parallels. They're meant to be placed parallel to the wall, and if the guns can fire straight down these, they end up causing, well, they end up being destroyed. And then you have gun galleries, which are an improvement on the parallels and allow you to put the big siege guns into the entrenchments. Anything else special here? Look at these. I think these are in the wrong set. I think these are meant to be used on the field battles for the fatigue. If you use half move for something, and that would have been useful to note. I had them tracked in with other stuff. You also have these disorganized gun markers and out of command markers, which again I left out. I was kind of ignoring the out of command. All right, what else do you have? So something that affected the last battle is the terrain effects chart. This has a different terrain effects chart from Jena Auerstadt. It didn't screw me up with anything except I could only find cultivated and not difficult cultivated on the chart that I was using for that, but I knew what they were. But here it's actually pretty important that you use this because this has some terrain types which are simply not available in the Jena Auerstadt map in any sense. So they're going to have to be coped with there. I guess there are skirmishers. I don't know if there are. They would be standard rules for them, which might be a little weird because this is still 1807. And the numbers that existed over in the other series might be more appropriate. And honestly, I'm thinking about throwing all the optional rules out in this one, so I'll just use Tirailleurs. If I have any, well, I do have light infantry. I have things that are called lights. I don't know if they actually qualify. Yeah, that's artillery. Yeah, I don't know. Yep. We do. So I gotta make decisions on that. But that's something we can worry about a little later. So let's take a look. The time scale. Regular turns are 5 days long, with the first turn being 12-day. But the operational map is broken up into rounds to not confuse you with the term turn again, even though the base game system uses turns. And every 5 days you get to do some operational movement as part of it. And it's, you know, maybe time condensed, maybe not. It's a weird situation. And you're allowed to keep going as many operational rounds as you wish. French go first on every turn except turn 8, which is when some Russian reinforcements probably come on the map and try to relieve the siege. Not relieve it, but help. Okay, so the sequence of play, you look on the chart, get your reinforcements from there. Then you'll start the operational rounds. And like I said, you just keep doing as many as you like. You know, I mean, you're going to be seeing probably no more than a day's action for the most part. If the investment has been completed, then each turn the Prussians lose a point of morale. And remember, that's kind of how you lose the game. It's not the only factor. It says surrender, but that only happens under certain conditions. But in order to invest it, you have to take all these stars. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I believe. You have to occupy all of them. And the Prussians can resist you to some extent with these forces. Later on, they get more, but yeah. Okay. There's also the possibility, once you're invested, that Prussian troops surrender, desert, whatever. Then the French get to do their siege actions. First, they get to fire their weaponry, and that's going to be their siege guns and their mortars. Their mortars are there to try to start fires in the city. The siege guns are there to knock down the walls, and the battery is slowly getting weaker. After any firing, you're allowed to construct and repair the French siege works, which is those counters there, the 3 different types. And they basically each cost you 1 point of construction. You have to have troops in place. We'll see that in a moment. Then you're allowed to move within the fortifications network or in the open. If you're moving in the open, every 250 meters of movement causes a reaction fire from the walls. You really don't want to be caught in the open. Ideally, you will dig your way right up to the walls, but that may not be feasible. If you are able to get a wall damaged enough and you get troops next to it, you can attack. After those attacks are addressed, the movement is all done at once, the attacks are all done at once, just to get you to where you want to go. Then you get to rally. Now, you also generate fire. It says here, movement within, if moving in the open, there's a penalty. You also generate fire if you're moving within damaged siege works, if you have to expose yourself in that way. And it's less effective fire than being in the open, but it still is an issue. Then we go to the Prussian siege actions. They're allowed to move within the city. For the most part, I think they're allowed to shift wherever they like. With the exception of the artillery, you're only allowed to move 1 artillery per turn. But you're allowed to pivot the artillery to get the facing that you want each turn differently. Then you fire, and for the Prussians, this fire is going to be attempts to destroy the French siege works. Then you can perform repairs on the walls. And by the way, during the French construction, they can repair their entrenchments. Then you have the opportunity to sortie, which I think if you do it, oh, no, that's a different thing. So sortie is an attempt to send up to 3 of your battalions out to run up to the French siege works and try to cause them problems. And you might get hurt doing that, but you might also delay the French. Then there's counterattack. If the French are on the walls, you're allowed to use your units to try to push them back off. And that includes this redoubt here. Finally, you have your rally. Basically, units just get knocked out of the fight, and then they recuperate. Okay. And finally, you check to see whether or not the fortress surrenders, which the requirements for that are 0 morale. This is, I'm trying to remember it, but 0 morale, a French unit sitting, I believe, on the second pink dot in. There's 2 sets of walls, a lower front wall, and then an even higher and stronger secondary wall. If you can breach that secondary wall, if you can get control of it, and it's at level 0, which it will be if you stay there. But it doesn't happen automatically. It's like there's a turn delay in there. Okay, so the operational game. This uses regular French moves at the end of the French movement. At the end of the French movement phase, a French infantry unit that did not move during the phase may build for free 1 redoubt printed on the operational map. Okay, we need to see this thing. We've got these printed redoubts, and other than this one, they're all sitting outside of that danger zone. You're only allowed to build 1 per turn, though. There is not really a means of marking which ones are created and which ones aren't. I might put counters on them and reveal them by removing the counters, or maybe not. I don't know. Okay. And then you have defensive fire, offensive fire, melee. Then the Prussians and Russians get to move. Entering the city itself doesn't cost you any movement points. Movement in and out of the city is only possible by the 5 gates leading to a trail or road, and only before siege works are built. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, this is weird to me, and we're going to have to see the special rules for when these guys come. One of the things is you're probably going to have to abandon this if the French start creating siege works, or else you're not going to get these units back in. The cav, I don't think are going to be of any use to you on the siege, but these guys are. Once any siege works have been constructed, movement in and out of the city is only possible by the road to Altschletland something or another. This road. And the trail leading to the ferry. Okay. So you can't go in the back door anymore. That's probably fine, because the point is the siege works are cutting these roads off. That makes sense, because that's where the construction area is. Okay. Then the French get their defensive fire, the Prussians get to fire, the Prussians get to melee, and there are no rally phases. Anything that's disordered gets flung back, and it'll come back into play. Okay. Turn 1 has only operational rounds. There will be no siege activity during turn 1. Turn 8, Kamensky's troops are deployed in the entrenched camp or the fort of Weichenmündel. These 2 things. And they move first. On the second operational round, Lan may come in from the east trail edge top of the map. Okay, there we go. Yeah, so that's up here. That's what I thought, but marked with the blue star. Oh no, this one. And therefore can move on the second half of the operational round. So they can try to cut off the access. And that's going to mean that we need to worry about that marsh or whatever. Is that what it's called? Marsh.
cav charges allowed. You can form however you like. It penalizes the attacker. The infantry will be in column value for their melee, and cavalry will be... Oh, it really penalizes the attacker. They're only able to attack at a 1, and cav are screwed as well. Okay, even on defense. All right. French movement on the operation map within the shaded zone surrounding Danzig. If a line of sight exists from a French unit to any point on the walls of Danzig or Weichenmühlen, the unit suffers an automatic opportunity fire of 7 fire factors for every shaded hex it exits, and that'll be on here. And you'll notice there's shaded hexes around this fort here. That's probably not something you can take. This attack occurs regardless of the presence or orientation of any enemy artillery counters on the map. But there's siege-style artillery on here, isn't there? No, that's over there. Okay. And do we have... Yeah, I don't think you're allowed to enter that at all. I don't think you're allowed to play with that. Outside the shaded fire zone, a unit within 3 hexes of the shaded fire zone can be subject to artillery fire during the defensive fire phase. If an LOS exists from part of the walls to a French unit, then the following fire occurs during defensive fire. A hex adjacent to the fire zone hits you at 3. 2 hexes away hits you at 2. 3 hexes away hits you at 1. The hexes, including a blue star, are immune from any fire from the fort or the city. This is typically in compliance with terrain features such as woods, but the peculiar shape of the city walls causes bizarre line of sights. Basically, you got to be able to take those without getting killed by being at them. It may also not just... So, like, there's a woods here protecting that. That's fine. There's a town here. That's fine. It's in a town. You could probably hit this, but it made more sense. Here, yeah, I don't have a good argument for that one. It's basically... Oh, but this is too far away. This one could be hit at a 1 otherwise. This one's covered by woods. This one, Jesus, I don't know. Looks like it's too far from there, but and it's covered by woods there. Oh, anyway. Prussian and Russian movement on the operational map. Prussian and Russian units move using standard rules. Prior to field fortifications being built, they can move into and out of the city, the entrenched camp, and the fort freely, entering and exiting any marked by any marked road or track. Once the siege works start, movement in and out of the city is only possible through the 2 roads that were pointed out. Prussian and Russian units cannot enter the concentration area or hexes covered by the siege map. As soon as the... which is basically this part. I don't know how much you want to screw around with that because, what's this? Bierfurstberg is here. I think part of the siege map covers this, but this is one of the entranceways into the city, right? So you got to be able to go through that. Okay. Let's see what we get. As soon as on the operational covered by the siege map, and then they're immediately moved inside the city at no cost and without triggering opportunity fire from the French. I don't know quite what that means. I think if you enter by one of these, you go right up to the walls. It seems like some of the wording's kind of... As soon as they enter the concentration area from the operational map, as soon as a French enters, all the Prussian and Russian units present on the operation map in the area covered by the siege map... okay, yeah. Yeah, so if you're here and then the French enter the concentration area, then all the Prussian and Russians teleport back to the city so that you're not in an inconsistent situation. That makes sense. The Vistula. There's small boats and rafts. One stack of units per movement phase can use small boats and rafts. By starting the turn adjacent to the river, it takes the entire operational round, including movement and fire, to cross. At the next operational movement and fire, the unit is placed on the other side of the river as long as there's no enemy unit in the target hex. I don't know what happens if... I guess you get turned around if there's someone there. The ferry. You can use the ferry here. At the end of the trail, by spending 4 movement points, any number of units per turn can use the ferry, and you can't destroy it. It's like an ironclad or something. That'll transport either player. The fort of Weichelmund has a permanent ferry on the Vistula, not shown on the map. You can move between the 2 parts of the fort without costing extra movement points. No biggie there. And then a bridge. The French can build a bridge. To do so, an infantry unit must start adjacent to the river. At the end of the turn, not only the operational movement and combat, but the whole game turn, a bridge is placed across the adjacent river hex side. The bridge can only be built in the portion not in a shaded hex. You probably don't want to build it near a shaded hex either, because you're going to be taking opportunity fire. And so it's pretty damn limited. So like you could build it here. This is immune. That's a decent space for it. But 1, 2, you couldn't build it here. That could be fired on. 1, 2, 3. Here could be fired on. 1, 2, 3. This can be fired on. This is pretty much the only hex you can build it in. Maybe you could build it from this side. I don't know. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. No. Yeah, you can build it only in that star hex. They should just say that. Because anywhere else, you're just sitting there, and the other player doesn't pass, and they keep firing. Okay. The bridge can be destroyed if an enemy unit enters one of the 2 hexes on either side, but it cannot be destroyed by artillery fire. It can be rebuilt following the same procedure, however. Before the bridge is built, retreating units blocked by the Vistula will be eliminated. I assume they will be eliminated if they're not crossing at the bridge, no matter what anyway. That it doesn't just make the Vistula able to be crossed anywhere by retreating units. Just thinking. Movement between maps. During any operational round, French units can enter the concentration area through the red arrows. The regiments must break into battalions, and then they keep moving during the French siege actions. That's going to be a different step of the game. But basically what you do is you take one of these regimental units, you find the associated battalions it breaks down into, and they show up here in the concentration area. The exception to that is Lannes Grenadiers cannot enter the siege map. That would be degrading to them. Stacking in the operational map, the units used are regiments and double batteries. Prussian units are battalions, except for Kamensky, who have regiments. Russian and Prussian units are limited to using column formation for movement. Using these units would be very rare in such broken terrain. Using them in line would be very rare in broken terrain. It's highly recommended they do not get too far away from the city. They may adopt line formation while not moving by using, for example, a Voltiger counter next to the unit to show its line orientation. In that case, the battalions have a fire value of 2. So yeah. Probably not going to see much of it. All infantry battalions have 6 movement points on the operational map. Artillery units on the operational map, there's regular field batteries. They work the same as anything else. The siege batteries, they have only 1 step, and this is the mortars too, and 4 movement points. If they're attacked in melee, they're disorganized. If they're attacked in melee after they've been disorganized, they're actually eliminated. This is one of the few things that you can eliminate in the game. And our battery is down again, and that thing is saying green, and it's fucking lying. And I'm guessing I don't know how I'm burning through batteries so quickly. Am I really talking that much? Having the battery upside down, the charger upside down, seems to be holding up this time. And I threw another battery in that camera. Now that camera is just on, which is weird. Like, it won't turn off if it's got power. It also
has a broken screen, I think, but I don't know. My life with these cameras has not been too good. So what are we on? So this doesn't really talk about stacking. I mean, it doesn't matter what the size of the units are. It has to do with, I would guess, the amount of steps they have, as normal. Okay, field batteries are normal, siege batteries, mortars we talked about. Line of sight on the operational map, normal. Fire on operational, normal. Line of communication. The French have one on the west end of the map, which will be over here. Except for Lan, who will be entering on the east on turn 8. And their line of communication will be their entry hex. Prussians and Russians have a line of communication to the city of Danzig or the fort of Weichelmund, whichever is closest to the unit that's retreating. The marshes. The small marshy area on the siege map has no effect on play. It's way up there in the corner. I don't know why you'd end up there, but the marshy area around Danzig were mostly cultivated areas with patches of marsh and a small network of trails. Other areas were crossed by small canals. Moving in them was simply slow. The terrain effects chart shows the possibility to move in marshes, in swamps, and even on limber artillery, and that any formation is possible. Yeah, we're going to have to fight in that marsh, that's the problem. But it's just based on this. We have a star for artillery, though. Artillery can always move 1 hex per movement phase in marshes, even though it may be prohibitive. It costs them 5 movement points to move a hex. So, yeah. Okay, fortifications. Danzig and the fort of Weichelmulden. They cannot be breached without siege works. It's not in the scope of this game to besiege the fort. Controlling the banks of the Vistule and therefore blocking supplies from reaching the city by boat would be sufficient to blockading Danzig. Therefore, you don't need to take the fort, you just need to take the star hexes. Okay. The Prussian entrenched... Oh, these have a shaded killing zone, which would be dangerous to enter, so you don't want to. The Prussian entrenched camp, this was a strong structure protected by many guns. It has the same shaded killing zone as the fortresses have. Printed hexagons. These structures don't exist before the French make them. They have no impact on movement or formation before they're constructed, and they're not a fortification per se. They can be built by the French only in these locations. The French spend a full operational round without movement in a non-built redoubt. Oh, you use a square marker. Yeah, you use some kind of... You mark its orientation, and it becomes an active redoubt. And we have redoubts in here. No. There we go. I assume the direction that the square is facing is the only direction that the redoubt applies. We'll see if that's what they tell us. Only 1 redoubt built per operational round. Whenever the terrain was, it's now open terrain with no formation restrictions and a defensive bonus of -2 to fire, -2 to melee. Unit facing is still required, however, there are no restrictions to facing. Okay. Whatever. If the redoubt is taken by the enemy or enemy unit enters the redoubt, then it is removed from play, but it can be rebuilt. It doesn't cost any construction points. Rally is automatic at the end of operational movement in combat, not in each operational round. Once a unit is disorganized in an operational round, it has to retreat towards its line of communication. These units do not rally before the end of the turn. So this is weird, but yeah. They're throwing this operational term around. Basically, if you get disordered, you fall back and you're fucked. But you don't die. Well, you do if you get another disorder. Prussian units retreat until they reach the fort or the city. French units retreat until they reach the edge of the map. Then they retreat off the map. But they'll rally and can re-enter the map at any entry point on the next reinforcement phase. Okay, let me take a little pause because my throat is hurting.
and we'll be at the siege game, plus I can let the batteries charge a little bit. And this is where my big questions really are. Whether there's stacking restrictions on the dots and stuff like that. I don't really recall that. I kind of skimmed through it. Feels like I've spent forever and not gotten a lot of ground in this rule book. But I guess that's life. Somebody actually commented about lack of production in these videos, and yeah, obviously. But you know, beyond that, I think things have taken a real, like, I think the very early videos that I had, I would have watched something like that. Because all I did was describe what was going on in little bits here and there. But as soon as I started adding the intros, and because people wanted the rules to be looked at, and the review part, oh man, it stopped. And once they went beyond 15 minutes, because I'm just like slowly able to think and putter about and everything. But some of you enjoy it, so I wouldn't watch it anymore. There's no excitement in me. Okay, where are we? Concentration box of... That's this. Although here it says Ziegenkenberg, and here it's Ziegenkendorf, but here it's Ziegenkenberg. I don't know. Or in an undamaged trench network are not subject to opportunity fire. Units in concentration box can't be fired on. Cannot be fired on under any circumstances. Units in the trench network can be fired on during the Prussian fire phase. If you move outside the trench network, you trigger opportunity fire with firepower of 7. This doesn't cost any ammunition from the Prussians. I think the Prussians don't have ammo. They just give free fire. Nor does it count against the 1 fire per turn the Prussians typically follow. This opportunity fire occurs once for every 250 meters of distance that you're traveling in the open. Movement in the trench network is unlimited in distance and doesn't trigger any fire as long as the path is made up of undamaged field fortifications. You can move onto a pink dot either by, this is for the French units. So the French is what I'm going through here. Onto a pink dot either by assault on a damaged position or by building the fortification network onto the pink dot. And then you're able to step onto it, I guess. French units never move to the green dots or inside the city. When a French unit occupies the inner wall, the second pink dot, so we got that depth everywhere. Then a breach is considered made and the morale is checked for possible surrender at the end of the turn. So that's the combination, is you have to be on the second pink dot and have them at 0 morale. Not all guns, rifles, and smaller guns are represented by the Prussian artillery and would be very gamey to look like you can try to slip by the artillery. So the free fire happens with that firepower of 7 no matter what. You don't have to trace from an artillery piece. Oh, and yeah, range doesn't matter, nothing. Examples of opportunity fire are indicated by gray stars. I don't know what they're talking about here. Oh, this is an example of play. Prussian and Russian movement on the siege map. Movement outside the city is possible only during sorties. Prussian and Russians are placed either inside the city or on pink or green dots, and they can freely move from any of those to any others. These are free and simultaneous. Unit stacking. French units entering the siege concentration box via the red arrows on the operational map are broken down into battalions. Later, if they wish to return to the operational map, they consolidate back to regiments. If units have taken any losses, they'll be getting steps equal to what they have available. Losses are going to only be tracked using numeric counters. There's no sheet for this one, although you could make one. The stacking of French units at each field fortification counter, including redoubts, is limited to 2 infantry steps and an artillery or mortar battery if the element is a gun gallery. Saps in parallel can only hold the 2 infantry steps. The walls of the city of Danzig are divided into roughly 100-meter segments. And that's, as far as I can tell, that's each of these lines is a segment of the wall. I may be too tired to do this. Each undamaged green or pink dot can stack 1 infantry battalion of 2 steps, or a combination of 1-step units, and 1 artillery battery. The center of these counters is set exactly on the dot, but they can pivot. Kamensky's Russian units cannot enter the siege map, but they can enter the city via the ferry or road to Scotland. If any of Kamensky's units enter the city, it's considered relieved, and the morale marker will go up for that, and I think it's a 3-point increase. The order in which combat units are stacked is irrelevant when they're fired on. Artillery can fire even if not on top, and a siege structure can be damaged even though it's on the bottom. There are no leader counters, and their effect during the siege was general. No command rules should be used. I think I'm not playing with any of the optional rules because there's not really artillery to shoot at. There's not really much any field artillery. There's maybe the cav play, but I am just trying to think. Fatigue rules wouldn't work. There's not really formations, which can be rested or whatever, and the time between turns, I don't know. I just don't know. The 4 types of artillery on the siege map, there's field batteries. Field batteries' firepower is checked using the rangefinder, and they can fire only at units in the open during a Prussian sortie or on units performing counterattack. Well, that means there must be French artillery. That is not. I don't recall seeing any in the formations, so I'm not sure. Or on units performing a counterattack if you're on a green dot set in a field for fortification built on the second wall. Only field batteries can fire on enemy units performing a sortie. When moved to gun galleries, they're automatically unlimbered like siege batteries. There's Prussian siege batteries, which are the guns that you see on the board there, I believe. The counters have 1 step. They take a step loss or fail a morale check. They're flipped to their damaged side. When they're damaged, they can be repaired using points from the siege gun pool, which is, there's like 40 of them. 1 battery can be relocated to another part of the wall each turn. Damaged batteries in the calc redoubt cannot be repaired. That's whatever's here. They can freely, but there's no dot to place them, so that whole thing is kind of weird. I don't remember seeing any rules on that really help. They can freely rotate on their pink dot during the Prussian turn and can perform opportunity fire. But watch line of sight. Basically, you can't cross the wall. They never leave their first or second wall. They're not deployed back on the reserve, and they never go into the reserve area or take part in a sortie. When the French enter a pink dot where a damaged battery is, it's directly moved on its damaged side to an available pink dot somewhere else on the map. You get a free move from it. They cannot move or unlimber on the operational map. Okay. The French siege batteries, I'm going to hold off and take a break because I'm feeling worse than usual. Let's get to the siege batteries. There's two types, 12 and 24 pounders. And again, I don't remember any field batteries. They're not in the initial set. Oh yeah, we got them built into some of the... Okay. All right. I see them now. Where are we? French siege batteries. Two types of siege batteries, 12 pounder and 24 pounder. They're not damaged the same way as the Prussian batteries are, but when the fire table requires they take a loss, or they fail a morale check, they move back to the concentration box, limbered, I don't know how big a deal that is. The gun's orientation is the orientation of the gun gallery counter. They're not allowed to pivot, but they're going to have a 90-degree arc of fire. And you could do that using a piece of paper. The game, when you start reading the rules, tells you to cut this out. It's pretty obvious you're going to need this, I guess, especially if you're used to the siege of... the Art of Siege game, but it also says to cut out another portion of the counter sheet to give you a right angle. I mean, you don't really need that, but it's kind of one of those, hey, I'm not gonna fucking be able to, how many people read the rules before they punch any of the counters? Personally, the prep work, especially involved in, I guess people who don't clip don't have the problem as much as I do. But I end up punching the counters and clipping the games so that I'm ready to start reading them or whatever. It takes me longer to prep the counters than it does to read the rules usually. So. And that's such a common thing. There should be like a slip of paper or something saying, warning! I don't know. But again, it's not a big deal in this case. What are we looking at here? Same 90-degree arc. The French battery fire phase occurs before movement. If they're disorganized and moved to the concentration box, they'll be excluded from firing the next turn. And that's when they're being repaired. Siege batteries can't fire on units performing a sortie or units on the green dots. All they're doing is going to fire at the walls. Mortars, these can be unlimbered in any gun gallery free of any other artillery and can fire only on the city itself. When firing, the distance and the target are irrelevant. You roll a die. On a 6, you create a fire in the city and reduce its morale by 1. Everything else is ignored. These do not use ammunition points. The 12 and 24 pounders use ammunition points. Now, it doesn't say how many times you can fire them yet, and I'm not really sure because the amount of shots that are available, the amount of ammo that's available, makes it seem like you can fire multiple times per round, per turn. Otherwise, you would never run out. Line of sight on the siege map from either of the city walls. The Prussian guns can fire at anything on the map except the concentration box or the calci box. Over there. I'm not sure what the calci box is. Like maybe that's where those guns belong, and they can just fire from anywhere on the wall. That has not been made clear to me yet. Prussian batteries may fire at their target within the firing arc as shown below. The fortifications were very high. Units could fire over trenches and other units. The only blocking element is the second wall of Danzig. If the line crosses part of the second wall of Danzig, the line of fire is blocked. And the first wall is lower, so you could, You might, well, no, you've got, nothing's going to block you anyway. Yeah, I don't know. I was thinking you might want to position your guns up on the second wall to be able to fire over first wall portions, but first wall portions don't block you even if you're on the first wall. Second wall portions do block you even if you're on the second wall. So, I don't know. Fire is used determining the rangefinder. The distance is measured from the front of the artillery to the pink dot if the French are firing, or to the front of the target unit if the Prussians are firing. Artillery has a firing arc of 90 degrees. The fire factor on the counter is used for the first 100 meters, and then, and I had to cut this. This is going to be an issue, as is this. I tried to trim along the sides. I did it with an X-Acto, and it didn't come out all that great. So it's decreased by 1 for a distance from 100 to 250 meters, and then by 1 further for each additional 250 meters, each slice of the map. -2 against any type of undamaged fortification, including Danzig's walls and intact field fortifications. And -1 if the fortification is damaged in any way, this by even by a single point of damage. Points of damage only count against the walls. The field fortifications just flip over if they're damaged. -1 when movement in the open ends at 250 meter segment in a village. More than half the counter is covering a gray structure. And they're here and then over there, I don't know, some over here, whatevers. Fire results, a final die roll. Okay, so we've got a chart for this over here, and that tells you all the effects, and it gives you a number, which is a die roll of 0 leads to no effect. A morale check will be the asterisk. The units in that space, I'll check morale regardless of their position in the stack. If they fail and they're artillery, they're damaged or disorganized. A 1, 2, or a 3. Okay, a 1 is infantry lost and a battery damaged if it's Prussian or disorganized French, and damaged the field fortification, but no effect on the walls. A 2 is 2 infantry losses and battery damaged or disorganized, and field fortification damage, and the wall takes 2 damage if the fire comes from a 24-pounder, or 1 damage from a 12-pounder. A 3 is 3 infantry losses, and the battery is damaged or disorganized. This is not a possible result on a fortification, as it has -1 even if damaged. And you'll see. The 3s, I guess, because there's no pluses possible. Okay. Enfilade, the parallel siege work, is so named because the trench is built parallel to the enemy position. If you manage to get, and this is pure art of siege, if you manage to get a shot that goes in one side and out the other of the short sides of the counter, you've got an enfilade. And that, the entire parallel, and the entire parallel is within 750 meters, which might be the gunfire range, I don't know. No, they go further than that. Then the parallel counter and units it contains undergo an immediate 7 fire factor opportunity fire with no modifier for range, but with modifiers for being a fortification. Saps and gun galleries built inside are immune to enfilade fire. Built inside the walls of Danzig. Well, yeah, gun galleries built inside the walls of Danzig. This is problematic because you're rolling a die on something. It happens once at the end of each siege construction phase, I guess. In the old art of siege, they and anything in them were just destroyed. It was just, you don't want to do this. This is almost as bad a situation. That fire on the 7 table is you know, gonna damage, wreck the fortification. It's gonna hurt units in it. I'm not really sure that it makes much sense to me to let the damn thing exist. But you'd have some partial field works that you could repair later. So, I don't know. It's certainly not something you want to do, but you're paying slightly less cost, if something. I don't know. I really don't know. I like the destroyed. Just get rid of the shit. Line of communication on the siege map, there isn't one. When a French unit is disorganized, it flips back to the concentration box. When a Prussian unit's disorganized, it goes back into the city, the gray area. Neither side can have units destroyed for being disorganized twice on the siege map. Fortifications, there's 4 types of fortifications on the siege map. Walls of Danzig itself. Each is divided into segments of about 100 meters, centered on a pink dot, which can be occupied by a single artillery battery and up to 2 steps of infantry. Artillery fire and enemy infantry may decrease this fortification level. The defenses include 2 very high walls, the second being higher than the surrounding hills. When the French infantry occupy both walls, then a breach has been made. Units on the walls are placed so their center covers the pink dot. No artillery can be deployed on a wall segment with a fortification level less than 10. If an artillery is present, then when the level drops under 10, it's displaced to another pink dot. However, infantry can be deployed on damaged segments. Fire on a wall segment is at -2 if it's intact. Yeah, -1 if it's taken any damage. French movement through Danzig's walls depend on its fortification level. If the fortification level is 16 to 20, the French can't do anything. Movement from the siege area to the walls is possible at damage under 15. In that case, the French unit can assault that segment, but it has to move in open terrain and therefore trigger the opportunity fire. However, you can dig your siege works right into the walls. The purpose of the siege network is to get closer with both your guns and your troops. You expend construction points to build saps, parallels, and gun galleries. Digging. During French siege actions, construction points are expended to repair the field fortifications at a cost of 1 per point for each damaged element. The construction points are expended to construct new fortifications in accordance with restrictions below. As each new fortification counter is placed on the map or repaired, the French player must deploy at least 1 step of infantry to that fortification. You can do multiple points of repair and building work with just 1 unit, though. Each field fortification can hold 2 infantry steps and a battery if it happens to be a gun gallery. The siege network starts from the concentration area, and it's going to build out with one of these at a 90-degree coming off the edge of the concentration area. That's a sap. That's your way of moving towards the wall. You're allowed to connect 2 consecutive saps, but then you have to build a parallel. You can't just dig straight for the wall with the saps. The parallel, here, let's put 2 of these together. The parallel is going to be a T-bone to the sap. And I believe it has to be exactly kind of in the middle. Now, once you have this, you could start building another sap off of it. There's some danger to that because if these saps get damaged, then you have to repair those saps before you can get troops through by having a couple of different sets of saps going into each line of parallels. You end up with a more robust structure, they say. I'm not sure that that's necessary. When you want to build additional parallel, you could of course do it like this, but you can also, you just have to, unlike the sap with the T-bone, you just have to connect one corner to another. And that'll allow you to build sort of a curve around the fortification without exposing this. Now with that, we see, you know, a gun way over here could actually flank that. And this is pretty damn far away. As you get closer and closer, you're going to find your parallels are more and more in danger of long-range fire being able to hit. Now remember, 750 meters. So we're talking about to here. So there's sort of a hemisphere that you have to make sure you're protecting yourself. You're pretty safe out here, but as you get closer, you're going to have to worry about those angles. Okay. Do they talk about the double saps? Okay, a parallel or sap costs 1 construction point to either build or repair. A gun gallery costs 2 points to construct, but you can upgrade it from a parallel for just 1 point. And it costs a point to repair. Saps cannot be upgraded to anything. Field fortifications have 2 steps. Now, the fact that you have to flip these is going to be a painful situation because you have to try to maintain what they look like on the board. Well, not just look like, you know, their position on the board. So, you know, this is going to be like in minis games where you accidentally bump pieces or, you know, accidentally bump pieces and maybe get, oh, I'm just in fire range, it looks like. That's the danger with this kind of free placement type thing. Okay, so that's damaged. When you take a hit, you're damaged. If you take 2 hits, or a damaged field fortification takes a second hit, they're just removed from the board. How much does that do for you? Well, we'll see. It makes it completely impossible to move through that space. The damaged ones, if you move through them, you can be fired on with opportunity fire. Movement through damaged fortifications triggers opportunity fire. This is why it's important but not mandatory to link parallels with 2 saps, as the Prussian guns can damage 1 sap and therefore block movement. Well, they block movement if it's not repaired. Let's look at the sequence of play here. So, French siege turn, French fire, construction or repair, then movement. So, I mean, I'm not sure that the duplicate saps make sense at all. It was done, but the way the game is structured, I don't think it's a reasonable choice. Seems like a waste of points. A parallel or gun gallery can be constructed adjacent to another parallel gun gallery. At least 1 corner of each counter has to touch it adjacent. For each field fortification constructed or repaired, the French have to put at least an infantry unit in the concentration. It can be 1 or 2 steps. When the network gets close to the Danzig walls, the French can extend it into the walls by constructing saps, parallels, and batteries that overlap segments of the wall. The wall segment must be at the fortification level 10 or less and be free of enemy infantry. If successfully constructed, the target wall segment drops immediately to fortification level 0. When the network gets very close to the walls, if this is required by the precise shape and dimensions between the dots, a sap element can be shortened to accommodate an additional gun battery. They show an image of this. Basically, you're going to be putting 1 counter on top of the other in order to get you directly over the dot. The shorter sap still needs a regular unit and as many points and everything. The French player may, during his construction, remove as many field fortifications as he wants without spending construction points. They're not limited by countermix, but you might find that you have extra ones that are unneeded. Printed readouts. I think that's these. These are isolated forts. They appear printed on the siege map. They do not provide any protection before they are linked to the network by a field fortification. When a field fortification is placed touching a printed redoubt, a gun gallery can be added for free in a subsequent turn. Then they behave as a gun gallery and artillery can deploy there. They also need a regular unit to build. Only the cost of building the redoubt is free. Okay, so this redoubt makes sense. This one I'm not so sure about. That looks like it's facing the wrong way, but you know, it seems to be available. The Fort of Kalki Schnatz. This small redoubt on the map is not part of Danzig, nor can it be reinforced. It can hold a total of 6 infantry steps, of which only 4 can man the walls. There's going to be some in there to begin with. Its lateral positions can be a nuisance for the French, as the batteries can flank their field fortifications. The fortification is not as strong as the walls of Danzig. The 3 sides have 2 steps each, which can be damaged like field fortifications. I don't know what the 3 sides are. I mean, you know, you could say, okay, there's that wall, that wall, that wall, what? Which can be damaged like field fortifications. Taking 1 or 2 damage will cause the walls to be considered damaged, and they are destroyed when they take a 3rd damage. They cannot be repaired by either side when it's been taken once. No Prussian guns can be placed there when it's retaken, as it's considered too damaged. The French can take it by moving 2 French battalions directly from a concentration area box to the Kalki box. Okay, so that's what it's for. They are not subject to opportunity fire. Then they can assault the redoubt with a melee value of +1 for being in column, but -2 for assaulting a fortified position, or -1 if it's damaged. If the Prussians lose the melee, their artillery is destroyed and the infantry must retreat to the city. In the following turns, the Prussians can attempt a sortie to retake the redoubt using the exact same rules, and the French can reinforce the redoubt through the Kalki attack box, which is immune to fire, but no unit can stay in or fire from this box. It's just a movement box. All right, we're going to pause again and go over the different actions that are taken during a siege, and that's basically the sequence of play actions in there. But my battery is dying, and siege actions. So what can the French do? They can fire. Mortars, then siege guns can fire. Each unlimbered mortar fires once without ammunition, but the siege guns can fire as many times as they want, firing 1 ammunition per time. Now, you have a limited amount of ammo in the course of the game, and I can't see much reason to be firing your guns early in the siege, because you're allowed to fire as much as you like. It seems to me that you're going to largely be trying to get to some optimal range and then maybe try to suppress some fire on the walls. Once you succeed in that, you keep digging closer to get to an even more optimal range with the intention of destroying the walls, and then you launch your assault. That's my guess. Fire values aren't added together. You'll be rolling each shot on this table. Okay, then the French can spend... Now, I wish I had this in front of me. So, yeah, fire, construction, and repair, yeah. So these are going to be in order. Construction and repair, the French get 10 construction points each turn. First, any damaged field fortifications can be repaired. It's not mandatory. There are some places where it kind of sounds like it's mandatory, but there's more places where it sounds like it's not, or where it's definitive that it's not. Next, field fortifications are constructed, ensuring there's a connected path of undamaged field fortification counters leading back to the concentration. So you may have to repair before you build in order to be able to reach with undamaged stuff. An infantry unit must be set on each fortification to do repairs or builds. And the costs are really 1 per, with the exception that gun galleries costs 2, but they can be upgraded for one from a parallel. Then you're allowed to move. You can move anywhere along undamaged fortifications without getting shot or anything. Artillery can unlimber, move and unlimber in the same turn. Remember, these are like 5 days. And they're deployed in gun galleries. When moving in the open, infantry have 6 movement points each. Each movement of 250 meters uses one of those movement points. Siege artillery can't move in the open. On the siege map, movement in the open triggers opportunity fire for each part. I'm kind of surprised that there's a movement allowance in the open. But I think that's there to handle the assaults, which have to be done in a certain amount of time, you know, essentially. Prussian and Russian movement on the walls and inside the city doesn't trigger any fire. French regiments that enter the concentration area during operational movement and fire phase must break down into battalions to move into the siege network. Okay, then if you're less than 250 meters from a wall segment that's at damage level 16 or less, these damage levels go the opposite way. The wall starts at damage level 20, and it's wall level, not damage level, really. It's a little confusing to phrase it that way, but anyway, a maximum of 4 infantry steps can be part of the attack, even if more than 4 are within range. Only French units not involved in building siege works in the present turn can be involved in the assault. The assault will be performed in column, which gives them a +1 bonus, but -1 for assaulting a fortified but damaged position, if the wall is at least level 1. Opportunity fire is possible as the units will be in the open during the assault. Any portion of movement performed in the undamaged network doesn't trigger opportunity fire. If the defenders have an infantry unit and or an undamaged artillery unit, then regular melee occurs. If they only have a damaged artillery unit, there's no melee and the artillery gets displaced. If there are no defenders left on the wall segment at the end of the turn, then it has been taken. On the next turn, if the damage level before was under 10, it can be connected to a fortification network by building an appropriate field fortification. As soon as this happens, the reduced fortification drops down to level 0. If a segment is under or equal to a damage level of 10, the French can build siege works directly inside the walls and occupy them in a single turn as described above, as long as no enemy occupies the position. If at the time of the assault, now I think that means that there's this capability to dig to an undefended position so you can take the wall without having to ever leave your entrenchments under those circumstances. Now, obviously the Prussians aren't going to want you to do that, so they'll defend their walls, but that might become painful. If a segment of wall is under, if at the time of the assault the damage level is between 11 and 16, the attacking infantry must spend an extra turn, destroying 10 damage levels during that turn before a network is constructed there. Okay, so this is fucked up to me. I think you do have to assault the wall. And this is what bugs me, because they go in the wrong order, right? So the sequence of play is French fire, then they do their construction and repair. This is when you'd build the entrenchments that would capture the wall. Movement in the network. Then I make the assault. And it sounds like what they're trying to say here is not what I thought it was. And this is... the looseness in the rolls, man. The same as in Viva la Emperor, but it sounds like what they're saying is maybe I get an extra capability to build more wall segments, or maybe on the next turn I can build the wall segment if it's under 10, is what they're actually saying, and not in a single turn as described above. Above it says on the next turn, so... So I think what I think after piecing this all together, what he's talking about is if I capture the location, I can sit in that location and destroy 10 points of wall segment to get it under 10, so that on the next turn, so it takes 3 turns instead of 2, as opposed to how it's worded, which is just throwing me completely wrong. Okay. And then we skip down to here, I guess, because this is all example. At the end of the assault, if more than 2 steps of French survive on the wall, then as the stacking limitation is 2 steps, the extra ones get displaced to the closest siege fortification without causing any opportunity fire. All right, we're going to skip for the Prussians because, or we're going to skip over or take a break or whatever. Not in good shape today. I don't know why. After the French take their actions, the Prussians get a sequence of siege activities. A normal sequence of play type thing. First, they're allowed to move, and basically they can shift all their infantry around within the fortress however they like. Infantry can only go on green reserve dots if the walls have been occupied or about to be occupied by the French. I don't know what about to be means, but you know, and you want to do a counterattack. Otherwise, you're just considered to be in the gray if you're not on the walls. Prussian artillery, you're allowed to only move 1 per turn, but the others are allowed to pivot to whatever angle they want. All the siege batteries can freely rotate, yeah. Then you fire each siege gun up to once without spending ammunition. It fires within its arc, gets the penalty for range. Fire hitting a battery in a gun gallery or parallel fortification through its side, thus enfilading the structure, is resolved with a fire factor of 7, whatever the distance. I don't know if that's true, whatever the distance. I believe it was limited to the 750. I think that's what they said. Let's just, you know, say things completely differently. Yeah, up within 750 meters, so, you know, which makes more sense because it's almost impossible to keep long-range fire from being able to cross. And again, you know, what were we looking at? We were looking at something a little bit like this. You can see how easily these get bumped. That was a problem with the Art of Siege stuff. Well, guns here would then be firing at 7 if range wasn't an issue, but instead they should only be able to hit to about here with that, which, you know, directs your angles of attack, really. You can't have... I don't think you can even go up the middle, to tell you the truth. I think you're going to be screwed if you do that. So you've got to go for kind of points in the battlefield, which could be over here, could be over here where there's more supporting guns. I don't know. All right. Repair. You're allowed to repair 1 damage point to 1 single wall segment controlled by the Prussians. Sortie. The Prussians are allowed to do a sortie of 6 steps of infantry, and which can target up to 3 field fortifications. What's going to happen is you have to attack the closest field fortification to the walls, measured with this again, and the Prussians decide which units they want to use for it. The first unit will be facing the field fortification that's closest to the Danzig wall. The next 2 will be adjacent to the first unit facing the next closest field fortifications. Each unlimbered French field battery can fire on the enemy units undertaking the sortie if they're within its firing arc. No unit or fortification element blocks line of sight for this fire. I don't know. Each battery can fire once at each unit performing the sortie. Calculate the range first, subtract 3 from each die rolled, as the sorties most usually would have occurred at night. Each battery fires individually. The French then deploy units from anywhere within the siege network. As long as there's an undamaged path between these units and the attack segments, a total of 2 steps can be deployed to defend each targeted field fortification. These can either be a 2-step battalion or 2 1-step battalions. This, I think, is a little different from Art of Siege. I think you had to garrison... First of all, I think you had to garrison to prevent yourself from being sortied. Well, that's all I was trying to say, so not first. Yeah. A 1-step battalion can replace a 2-step battalion if no other 1-step unit is available to reinforce. Resolve each melee separately. The units are considered the attacker and use their column bonus of +1. They attack an undamaged field fortification. There's a -2 to their attack value, -1 if it's damaged. If the French lose the melee, then the fortification is damaged or destroyed if it was already damaged. Siege or field artillery are sent to the concentration box. The attacker returns to the city. If the French does not retreat from the attack field fortification, no D result, no failed morale check, then the Prussian retreats unmolested and the fortification is unaffected. The Prussians can't attack the concentration box either by field, fire or melee. Now, there is no melee table here, which to me means you're going to be using the base game melee table. And likewise, you're going to be using the base game fire table, which appears to be about the same, with the artillery units that are firing. So you'll be using kind of regular Viva la Emperor rules for these, but a little modified, you know, more of it's abstracted. That leaves a situation. There's the possibility of casualties wiping out the location. And so they're not accounted for here. I don't know if that's something I should worry about, but I can't really do so unless I have more to work on, like a table that didn't have casualties on it. So it's not if the French does not retreat, it's if it's not empty. The Prussian cannot attack the concentration box either by fire or melee. Now, that's the thing. These guys, yeah, these guys have a morale and stuff. Okay. Counterattack. If French infantry occupies the first or second wall in a newly built field fortification, or simply by successfully having assaulted, the Prussians can counterattack with up to 2 battalions, 4 steps, from inside the city in a single melee, placing the counterattacking units on the green dot of the wall segment or the second pink wall dot if they're attacking back to the first wall. This is the only time formal stacking of 4 steps is allowed anywhere on the siege map. If the Prussians win this combat, only 1 unit can take the attack position. If they don't win, only 1 unit can remain in the attacking position. The other one goes back to the city. The attacker, I don't know if it matters if it's green. The attacker has a +1 bonus for the attacking column, but the defender gets the wall bonus if there's any wall left. If a successful counterattack involves a field fortification and or unlimbered artillery, then the artillery is disorganized and the fortification is destroyed. Disorganized units are immediately moved to the concentration area or the gray reserve area. Then we have the initial setup, which I've already done, except those guys have to go on the board there. And these guys, I have to figure out how to apply them here. There's no French on the board to begin with. They all march in. French and French allies, they get 1 infantry or cavalry step that they can add to a reduced unit on the map or bring back an eliminated unit with 1 step. As a reminder, the siege artillery are not damaged. They retreat. Field artillery cannot receive replacements if they get killed. The Prussians get 1 infantry step added. This is per turn, I guess. There's got to be a... No, there doesn't got to be anything. There's a rally stage. Maybe that's when it happens. Prussians add 1 infantry step to a reduced unit on the walls or in the city or in Kalki. but not up in Witchenmeister. Repair as many batteries as required, subtracting replacement points from the siege gun pool. You start with 40. Russian troops cannot be replaced. Ammunition is recorded. Field batteries don't use it. Prussian guns don't use it. Kamensky Relief Force, his Russians and a single Prussian unit land at the camp on turn 8. The operational movement in combat on turn 8 is inverted with the Russians going first. Lanz troops enter as reinforcements as well, and they can move straight away. The rest of turn 8 remains inverted. If a single Russian unit or the Prussian unit from Kamensky enters the city of Danzig at any time via the ferry or the road to Alt-Scotland, the city is considered, that's got to be hard to get to since you're starting over here. But the city's relieved and gets 3 morale for that. If one of his units enters one of the 4 hexes leading to the concentration area, okay. I thought there was 1 hex per arrow, but obviously that's not the case. Then the morale goes up by 3 hexes, even if technically the city's not been relieved. Okay. If one or more of Kamensky's units actually enters the city, the Russian regiments behave as Russian battalions, or as 2 Prussian battalions for the Fusiliers unit. Yeah, I don't know what that means. I guess you can deploy them on the walls. I thought there was a prohibition against that. Russian artilleries or any cavalry unit entering the city are considered as relieving it for morale purposes, but they can't do anything on the siege map. A couple special events in the game. A British corvette appears on turn 11. You roll a die. If the French are in a hex adjacent to the Vistula, only a 6 succeeds. Otherwise, a 4 through 6 succeeds. If it's successful, Danzig gets 2 morale. If it's unsuccessful, they lose 2. And Bennigsen, on turns 5 through 9, the Russians get a chance of Bennigsen moving his army. This will increase the morale of Danzig by 2. And it moves Lan 1 operational round. So he doesn't come on the map on the first turn, on the first Viva la Emperor turn / operational round is the word for that. Mines and countermines. When the siege network gets close to the walls, the French can dig a single mine. During the construction phase, 2 construction points are expended and a sap marker with a numerical marker on top of it, indicating the turn it was placed, is placed on the map leading from an existing fortification towards the wall. The French player should check the sap marker actually reaches the wall before sending his construction points. Otherwise, they just get fucked or something. I don't know. You just have to reach the wall. You don't have to actually hit a pink dot. Starting the following turn, the Prussian can build a countermine during their repair phase. They roll a die. On a roll of 6, the countermine explodes and the mine is removed from the game. During the following French siege fire phase, the French player can detonate the mine, roll a die, and that's the number of damage points the wall segment takes. Okay, victory. Investment is complete when all the blue stars, which are over here on this map, have been occupied by the French, or if a French was the last to pass through that hex. When investment is complete, you roll for Prussian desertion on the desertion table on the plate. Here. That says any decrease in morale causes a roll on the desertion table. This does not exactly match what the rules say. So, this is the number of Prussian infantry steps removed. Prussian player chooses the losses, which may include reducing or eliminating. These are permanently removed and not available for replacement. How do you remember what you can replace and what you can't? I don't know. I guess keep track of how many losses you've taken somewhere on a piece of paper or something. Desertion occurs each time morale is shifted by 1 due to investment, not each time morale is reduced. Now, each turn after complete investment is accomplished, there will be a -1 to the morale. Each time the mortars cause a city fire, there's a -1. The corvette is 2 points either way. If a pink dot drops to level 0, you get -2. But this is valid only once per game. So it's only the first time that I guess you take a pink dot. If Bennigsen Army moves, you get a bonus. If the Kamensky Relief succeeds. And if French infantry enter the second line of defense, only once, you get a -2. At the end of a complete turn, if Danzig's morale drops to 0, I would say if it is 0, because it's possible you could get it down to 0 and then it wouldn't be able to drop to 0 unless it goes back up. And a French unit is on the second wall, the city surrenders. If this happens before turn 13, it's a French victory. On turn 13, which is historical, it's a draw. On turn 14, minor Prussian victory. And on turn 15, or does not happen, there's only 15 turns in the game, it's a major Prussian victory. And that is that. I really enjoy the Art of Siege games, so I'm very happy to see, what's essentially another, well, I enjoy the two that use this mechanism, especially, and so I'm really happy to see it, getting a rebirth over on this on this system. It's not exactly, to me, it feels less like a Viva la Emperor game, even though it uses the core rules and everything, than it does an Art of Siege game. And I don't know how I feel about that. Right now, I'm happier about the Art of Siege thing because I just played a couple of Viva la Emperor battles. So, and there's more, I have more of the Viva la Emperor Napoleonic battles total than I do Art of Siege game situations. So it's really great to see this coming out, and I'm thoroughly happy, to see any kind of resurrection of that. All right, let's send this intro up.